Hello, everyone. My name is Monika Malon, and I'm a first-year PhD student at the Social Neuroscience Lab at the Institute of Psychology, Polish Academy of Sciences. And I'm very excited to be here today once again and to tell you a little bit more about our meta-analysis on 32 studies on over 42,000 participants. So this idea that loneliness is linked to prosociality was there already for a long period of time, because over 70 years ago, Hannah Arendt stated that loneliness creates this self-centered bitterness and destroys human ability to act together in a pursuit of common concern. And this idea didn't vanish in the meantime, because if you look at the Evolutionary Theory of Loneliness introduced by John Cacioppo, you can see that he also stated that loneliness results in this increased self-centeredness and decreased concern about the well-being of others. And this is super important, especially nowadays, I would say, because we do observe that loneliness is rising, especially among the Western societies. There are multiple studies that show that even half of the population might experience this chronic loneliness. So if that's really the case, if we are encountering this epidemic of loneliness, and if Hannah Arendt was right that loneliness results in decreased prosociality, then it all can make people less motivated to, for example, adjust to public policies regarding pandemics or climate change and so on. Well, there are some, let's say, statements in the literature that previous studies show overwhelming evidence that loneliness is correlated with prosocial behavior. But I'm here to tell you that there's a little bit more to the story, because after our initial literature review, we found that there's really actually a bit more complex link between these two. So we decided to do this meta-analysis. We defined loneliness as a significant mismatch between one's actual social relationships and his or her needed or desired social relations. And we defined prosociality as simply all forms of intentional actions aimed to benefit others. So what we did was search for records using these keywords such as social isolation, loneliness, prosocial, and so on. And we gathered over 2,000 abstracts to screen, which was one of my responsibilities here. And later on, we gathered these 53 full texts to be assessed in the eligibility assessment. And finally, we ended up with these 32 studies that were finally included in the final sample. So one of the things that really struck me when I firstly looked at this data was the fact that most of the studies, like majority of them, were based on self-report measures. So statements like, I help others, I am prosocial, and so on. And only 9 studies were based on informant ratings. So statements like John helps others, and these were mostly studies on children, where these informants were their teachers or parents or classmates. And finally, we gathered only 3 behavioral studies. So studies that were actually studying whether how one is actually behaving instead of what one says they would do in a certain situation, right? So if we look at the results, we can see this significant negative effect, but I would say it's far from overwhelming, and it's also far from consistent, because if you look at this forest plot, you can easily see, I don't know if you can see my pointer. Yeah, okay. This very high negative correlations as well as this very high positive correlations, right? So it's really, there's this high heterogeneity in our study. And I would say that besides this weak significant effect, one of the most important conclusions from our study is that we have identified these very big gaps in the literature. So mostly, as I said, in these behavioral studies, not to even mention neural data. And also there were very little studies regarding adult participants, and studies which would explore these different sources of heterogeneity, like why there are so diverse different results, right? So hopefully we'll be soon we'll be able to answer these questions, because we are launching this project on the link between loneliness and prosociality in our lab. But for now, if you have any questions regarding this topic or our project, please feel free to ask. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Monika. It's an important topic, and I think you managed to give us a really good insight very quickly into what is an enormous field of research. So we have literally all the experts in social neuroscience here in the wings here. So if anybody would like to jump in with some feedback for Monika.
Should I start?
Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. To be precise, I'm not a pure social science, but I do cognitive neuroscience, but I do quite many things regarding meta-analysis. So I would focus on this. But first, would you like a general comment regarding the presentation, and then on science? Okay, is it okay? So I found your introduction very good, really presenting the main features and definitions, which was good. But then, because it was a bit of non-disclosure ending, because it is not really finished, okay? Just statistically speaking, if your confidence interval is going between minus and plus, it is not significant, okay? I mean, then the finding is not significant. But I'm already going to the science, so let me finish with the presentation.
Yeah.
So for the time limits, I think you did a very good job. I mean, explaining nicely the theory, the main figures, then the definitions, then going to present clearly the method that you use, the methods. I mean, you use definition and how you did the search. All is well, okay, in these terms. So actually, I will dive into the science of it, and of course, this is a very important topic. But there are several levels of problems with this search. First of all, it's not only lack of behavioral studies, it's more attitudes, but then it could be also differences between field studies and maybe lab-based studies. If the first analysis, meta-analysis, revealed a heterogeneous measure for the effect size, then what you do, you need to divide the studies further into subgroups and then generate a specific size, average effect size per subgroups. And then this division into subgroups is the moderating action, okay? So for example, you can use your own definitions. One moderator could be, is it attitude or self-report or action or lab or field, or maybe it is culturally based moderating, but you do still have work. I mean, not, you said it yourself, it's not homogeneous. I mean, you have this, when you use the PRISM guidelines. So, you know, you have also the I square or the Q measures to point on heterogeneity. And if it is heterogeneous, it's not finished yet, okay? It's not over. You need to continue and dividing the samples into subgroups based on actually your hypothesis. I mean, it could be really attitudes versus behavior, it could be lab versus field, and so on.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
maybe and just by spotting this forest plot that you've managed, I think there are definitely more null or slightly positive studies, and then the very negative. So perhaps there is some theory-based moderating factor that can help you divide them further.
Monika, would you like to respond? Otherwise, we have some comments from both Bridget and Ivana.
Just a quick response, maybe.
Please.
So, when it comes to confidence interval, it doesn't include 0, but the prediction interval does. So, if this effect is significant in these terms, right? Like the confidence interval doesn't include 0, but and also regarding this. This feedback regarding different subgroups and further analysis. Thank you for this, because it's also very important. We actually already conducted some of the subgroup analysis, but this was a very short presentation, so I tried to just mention this main effect here. But yeah, we're exploring different let's say levels among which these studies may differ. So yeah, we're doing this subgroup analysis, meta-regressions, and we're still trying to find what's the biggest factor here, right? So once again, thank you for your feedback, because it's very important for me to hear from someone who really is in this meta-analysis field. Thank you.
Thanks, Monika, and thank you, Michelle. So Bridget, you had your hand up first. This is a race. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Monika. That was really interesting. And yeah, I agree with much of what's already been said. But I had a couple of questions. My first one is from an evolutionary perspective, this idea that loneliness would automatically lead to prosociality. Maybe there's a bit more depth that you could explore there. And I'm wondering, there could be some quite extreme individual differences, how whatever your social strategy is, whatever your social niche is, you're going to have a different strategy in how you respond to this sort of loneliness. So it might be worth probing that in relation to the meta-analysis, those sorts of individual differences that might be underpinning why there is so much diversity in these findings. I wonder what you thought about that.
Yes, so we are hoping to explore this further in this project I mentioned, but we do expect that some people may engage in this reaffiliation strategy, right? So be actually more prosocial to gain this social contacts. So it's probably dependent on how different people are in their social attitudes and how they approach others after being socially excluded or deprived, right? So yes, definitely there may be these two ways of behaving when one is lonely.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really interesting, and certainly the way that you could go with this that would make it really innovative, I think. And then my second question was about the different methods that people use, and you highlighted that there are only 3 studies using any sort of behavioural measure. And obviously, I think we all know now we're getting to the point where we realise that all these proxies we're using, including self-report, they're not really getting to what we want to in terms of the behavioural substance that we're interested in. But I also think that some of these behavioral games that people use are also not great, because you're asking people these very artificial, strange questions about what they would, or to project what they would do in a situation, which, also isn't quite perfect. And I think, what it would be a really great thing to try and do, which of course is extremely difficult, is to try and capture how people actually do behave in real life, in their own relationships, in their own stranger interactions. How pro-social are they in these situations? And I think that's really, really hard. But I wondered if you had any thoughts on how you might do that, if you were interested in that.
Yeah, it's definitely very important, because as my previous commenter said, that it's really important to divide the studies that were actually based on lab environment and those connected in real life. So what we are also planning to do in this grant we received recently is that we want to conduct this experience sampling study, which will actually compare this more ecologically valid measures of prosocial behavior, which will be simply like this noting down at the end of the day this prosocial actions one engaged in. It's also have its weak sides, but well, we have to somehow balance between this laboratory and ecologically valid environments. So we'll try to, yeah.
Really, and then we have a raised hand from Ivana, so I'm going to cut you off there. Sorry, Bridget, amazing feedback. I just have to tell you that I've been getting messages in the background going, these experts are the best. So thank you very much. Ivana, over to you.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, so first, Monika, thank you so much for the presentation. I just also wanted to say that I thought you did a really good job. I mean, it is such a short presentation, and I think you were like very clear and spot on. And of course, there's not room for you to delve deeper into all this. And I totally agree with all the feedback and questions you've gotten, that it's so important to delve into the heterogeneity of this. But I was wondering if you also thought about like the inverse causality. Does pro-social behavior also have an effect on loneliness? And, you know, maybe looking at it both ways, you can get at actually some of the different underlying mechanisms.
Yeah, I think that it's probably very probable that this link is bidirectional, right? So I think it's very important to further explore it. But to do this, we should do these experiments, right? Because to study causality, it's not that easy to be sure that our effect is precisely what we are thinking it is. But yeah, there is this hypothesis that this link, as you said, it may be bidirectional.
Fantastic. And I'm going to cut it short because we are running a little bit over and I hate that. So we're going to move on to our next speaker. Inbal Ravrubi is waiting in the wings. If you'd like to share your screens, and welcome to this event. Thank you so much for participating. And thanks to Monika for the amazing talk and to our experts for the feedback.